Hello, and welcome to FEMA Region 3's Introduction to Environmental and Historic Preservation. Throughout this and other modules, environmental and historic preservation will be represented by the acronym EHP. This introductory module is presented by Alison Rudenstein, Deputy Regional Environmental Officer in FEMA Region 3's Environmental and Historic Preservation Branch. EHP integrates the protection and enhancement of environmental and cultural resources into FEMA's mission, programs, and activities by ensuring FEMA actions comply with federal EHP laws and executive orders, and by incorporating EHP values into all of FEMA's programs and activities. FEMA has staff specifically assigned to be technical advisors on environmental and historic preservation laws and executive orders. These staff members conduct reviews to document project compliance with EHP laws and executive orders. By doing so, EHP staff help communities reduce the impact that disasters and emergency management operations have on the nation's natural and cultural resources. They provide specialized guidance and practical long-term planning assistance to communities to ensure that proposed projects align with environmental planning and preservation requirements. They also reduce the number of complex environmental compliance reviews through early communication with stakeholders. The EHP team provides technical guidance and compliance review for a variety of FEMA-funded grant programs, as well as for direct federal actions. The list on this slide is not exhaustive, though it does include programs EHP primarily serves. Funding under any of these programs is subject to EHP compliance review, a process that is explained in subsequent slides. Once program has determined that an undertaking is an eligible FEMA action and the scope has been finalized, EHP staff initiate their review process. This process can be defined in three distinct phases: triage, review, and approval. During the triage phase, the EHP specialists will check the project package for accuracy and completeness. They may request any additional information or an RFI that is needed to inform the compliance review, such as exact location, better photographs, limits of disturbance, etc. During the review phase, a qualified EHP specialist will identify any potential impacts to the environmental or cultural resources. This includes identifying resources within the area of potential effect and assessing the level of impact to those resources, often through consultation with regulatory agencies and interested parties, such as the State Historic Preservation Office or the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, among others. If there are opportunities to minimize or avoid impacts to these resources, those opportunities are explored in this phase. Once the review phase has been concluded, the determination phase will document compliance with the process, resulting in the Record of Environmental Consideration, otherwise known as the REC. The REC is the legal documentation of the compliance review and will be included in the final paperwork from program to applicant. The REC will indicate whether the project was determined to be compliant with the laws and executive orders for which FEMA reviews. The applicant should thoroughly read the REC and note any special project conditions. In accepting grant funding, an applicant agrees to the conditions of the REC. Conditions may include things like time of year restrictions for construction activities, etc. If the REC indicates the project is non-compliant, EHP recommends that program not fund the undertaking. Ultimately, the funding decision falls with FEMA program. EHP staff are qualified to provide technical advice and subject matter expertise. They seek to reduce the complexity of environmental and historic preservation laws. EHP strives to review projects in a timely manner. Cooperation from all stakeholders enables timely completion of compliance reviews. The bottom line is EHP is here to help. The next section of this introductory module briefs the laws and executive orders most commonly reviewed by FEMA EHP. What is the purpose of EHP review? FEMA, as a federal agency, is required to comply with environmental and historic preservation laws and executive orders. Whether the undertaking is a direct federal action funded and orchestrated by FEMA or a grant funded by FEMA, it must comply with federal laws and executive orders. FEMA EHP staff are technical experts well versed on these laws and can provide guidance throughout the grant process to minimize or avoid adverse impacts to our nation's resources. Therefore, open communication between FEMA program staff, applicants, and FEMA EHP staff is critical for successful compliance review. Now that we understand why EHP review is required, what is being reviewed? The laws listed on the left are some of the more well-known laws and executive orders for which FEMA EHP conducts compliance review. These laws either protect or require the consideration of resources such as wildlife, historic properties, water, floodplains, and air. NEPA, or the National Environmental Policy Act, requires consideration of impacts to the physical, biological, cultural, and socioeconomic environments. Other, perhaps less well-known, but still very important laws and executive orders for which EHP staff conduct compliance reviews include those listed on the right. These laws and others consider farmland, coastal resources, minor communities, fish habitat, wetlands, water bodies, migratory birds, wild and scenic rivers, and ensure proper solid waste management. In addition to these 15 laws and executive orders, a project could be subject to review for additional laws, some state and local, depending on the project activity and the resources within the area of potential effect. Companion modules to this webinar go more in depth on reviews for specific EHP laws and executive orders. Keep in mind that there are some laws with which every project must comply, regardless of federal involvement. These laws are listed on slide left. The National Environmental Policy Act, the Executive Order for Floodplain Regulations, and the National Historic Preservation Act, however, are triggered by federal involvement. In other words, if a project uses federal dollars or is federally permitted, it is considered a federal undertaking and must comply with these and other laws. Regardless of timing or funding program, these types of activities generally have a higher potential to impact EHP resources. New construction, ground disturbance, modification, expansion, or mitigation of existing facilities, work in or around water, debris removal and disposal, and demolition. If your project involves one or more of these triggers, please inform FEMA EHP staff early in the planning process. EHP can provide technical guidance to ensure compliance and potentially minimize or avoid effects. Please note that this is not an exhaustive list of activities. The following slide describes the documents necessary to complete EHP compliance review. Whenever possible, all projects must include complete and accurate scope of work, a statement as to whether the facility will be restored to pre-disaster condition. This also includes whether there will be changes from pre-disaster condition because of codes and standards, or mitigation must be clearly explained and include details of changes in design, materials, footprint, etc. A project must also include location, including GPS coordinates. A project should include construction details, including annotated site maps or engineering plans when available. A project must include details about new ground disturbance, including any work outside of the pre-disaster footprint, temporary access roads, staging areas, tree removal, including depth and limits of ground disturbance. A project must include the date of construction for all built structures affected by the undertaking when available. It should also include clear color photographs. This information helps to inform EHP compliance review. Inclusion of these elements with the project submission will minimize the likelihood of a request for additional information. Requests for information are only sent when necessary, as they can lengthen the review process and delay obligation of funding. This slide lists frequent triggers for requests for information, or RFIs. If the questions on this slide can be clearly answered by the information provided in the project submission, RFI is unlikely. Project location, materials used, method of construction, and site access are critical to informing the compliance review. If there has been previous coordination with a regulatory agency on a project, please provide documentation of that coordination, including copies of consultation letters and permits. Previous coordination may be required for work completed, though FEMA EHP reviews most projects prior to any construction activities occurring. EHP staff will coordinate with regulatory agencies as necessary. Once EHP has received all essential information, EHP staff will begin compliance review. In order to identify natural and cultural resources within the area of potential effect, EHP staff will consult a variety of sources, including flood maps, state historic resource maps, endangered species maps, and more. EHP will also consult with local experts, such as the State Historic Preservation Officer, tribal officers, and state environmental officers to identify resources within a project area. Following identification of resources, assessment of impacts, and the resolution of those impacts, EHP staff will document the compliance review by generating a record of environmental consideration. The REC is typically 2 to 3 pages in length and documents the compliance determination for each law and executive order reviewed, as well as the conditions necessary during project implementation to ensure compliance. FEMA program provides the REC to the applicant as part of the grant package. There are consequences of noncompliance. Failure to comply with processes and procedures as outlined in applicable laws and executive orders could result in a delay or loss of funding, criminal or civil penalties, or adverse publicity. Now that we understand the compliance review process, one can see that coordination across a variety of stakeholders is necessary. For that coordination, FEMA has unified federal review. For disaster-related projects that involve multiple federal agencies, there is a memorandum of understanding in place to streamline EHP compliance review and avoid a duplication of efforts. The process stipulated in this MOU is called Unified Federal Review. Unified Federal Review, or UFR, enables enhanced coordination, expedited timeframes, and consistent delivery of compliance review for applicable projects. Here in Region 3, FEMA has agreements to streamline review under the National Historic Preservation Act in all of our states, as well as agreements to streamline Coastal Zone Management Act review in Delaware and Maryland. These agreements were negotiated with state and tribal partners and stipulate abbreviated timeframes, standard treatment measures, and scopes exempt from consultation. In the future, Region 3 hopes to pursue agreements to further streamline the EHP process and better coordinate with other federal agencies. EHP online resources. In addition to viewing subsequent modules in this webinar, we encourage you to explore online resources available to you. Links to these resources can be found on the webinar main page and in the description of this video. Thank you for viewing our Introduction to EHP. We encourage you to explore additional modules in this webinar for an in-depth look at certain topics briefly addressed in this video.